continue work on the patent and trademark law overhaul legislation. Also, there's no clear timetable for votes on 2011 federal spending, as behind-the-scenes negotiations continue on those two competing proposals. Live now to the U.S. Senate here on C-SPAN 2.
Senator from Maryland.
I ask unanimous consent that the quorum call be dispensed with.
Without objection, so ordered.
Mr. President, I understand we are in morning business. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Mr. President, I take this time to talk about the budget deficit and what we need to do in order to bring our budget into balance, to have a credible plan to deal with our future growth in this nation. I start off by saying the budget deficit is an extremely serious issue for this nation. We do not have a sustainable budget. We cannot sustain a budget that creates debt at 10% of our gross domestic product and a gross debt that equals 100% of our GDP. We need to bring down our deficit in order to have the type of economic growth so that our children and grandchildren will be able to enjoy a better economic circumstance than this generation. But I think first, before we talk about where we need to go, we have to understand how we got here. And I'm not going to harp on this, but I want to make sure that the people of Maryland and the nation know how we got to these large deficits so we don't repeat the mistakes of the past. During President Clinton's administration, we balanced the budget. And I might say we did that. The Democrats did it without a single vote from the Republicans. We were on course to retire all of our debt, and that was just 10 years ago. Then, under President Bush, we cut taxes twice without paying for them. We went to war in Iraq and Afghanistan and didn't pay for it. To date, the war in Iraq has cost $770 billion. That's money that we had to borrow in order to fight that war in Iraq. We've chosen under the previous administration that it was more important to cut taxes than it was to balance the budget, and that was a mistake. President Obama inherited a huge deficit and an economy that was hemorrhaging 700,000 jobs a month. Well, it's time now to move forward. We have turned our economy around. It is growing, but we need to do it in a way that does not jeopardize our economic recovery. But it's absolutely essential that we start to move our budget back into balance and that we take aggressive steps to do it. Today in the Budget Committee, we heard from Erskine Bowles and from Senator Simpson from the Debt Commission. And I think we are all impressed that if we're going to get a credible plan, which is critically important for our nation to balance the budget, that we need to follow the example of the Debt Commission. Doesn't mean we have to agree to everything the Debt Commission did, but the Debt Commission recognized that we couldn't balance the federal budget by cutting discretionary domestic spending alone, that we need a game plan that brings all the major components of the budget together. Discretionary domestic spending, military spending, we need to deal with entitlements, and we need to deal with revenues. And we're only going to get this done if Democrats and Republicans work together for a credible plan. That's what we need to do in order to bring back our economy. Now, the only specific proposal that we've had come over from the House of Representatives to date, H.R. 1, their budget, I believe does not follow the example of the Debt Commission. I believe that it's extremely harmful to the process of trying to work out a plan where we have a credible effort to balance the budget with shared sacrifice. Because the House-passed budget, the Republican budget in the House, gets all of its savings from 12% of the federal budget, from discretionary domestic spending, and it jeopardizes our recovery. Mark Zandi, the economist from Moody's, said that it would lose 700,000 jobs if the House-passed Republican budget were enacted into law. Let me just give you some examples as to how it would affect the people of Maryland if the House budget became law. First, let me talk a little bit about some of the budget cuts itself. About 10 days ago, I was at the Greater Baden Health Center in Prince George's County, Maryland. They're expanding that health center to include prenatal care. And the reason, quite frankly, is that the infant mortality rate in Maryland is way too high. We rank 29th in the nation. Well, that's unacceptable. In the African-American community, the infant mortality rate is 260% of that of the white community. The problem is that we have too many low-weight, birth weight babies. Some die and become part of the infant mortality statistics. Others survive and have complications throughout their life. It's in our interest, from every perspective, to bring down that infant mortality rate and to provide prenatal care for women so that we have healthier babies. I would hope we would all agree to that. Well, we're doing something about that in Maryland, using monies that were part of the Affordable Care Act. The Republican budget would eliminate that funding. That community would not be able to expand with prenatal care, to do something about the health of our citizens. 2,900 community health workers would lose their jobs in Maryland. 2,900 community health workers would lose their jobs in Maryland if the House-passed budget, H.R. 1, became law. I've taken the floor on several occasions, a little bit earlier today, to talk about the Chesapeake Bay and the federal partnership. We've had a federal partnership in cleaning up the bay. It's the largest estuary in North America. It's a body of global significance, and it's in danger because too many pollutants are entering the bay as a result of population growth and development and farming practices. Well, we have a game plan to do something about it, but the budget that passed the House would cut the Chesapeake Bay program dramatically, by $25 million, making it extremely difficult for us to move forward on our remedial efforts. To make it even worse, there's an environmental rider that was put on H.R. 1 that says that none of the funds made available under this act may be used to implement the Bay Restoration Plan now underway. What does that mean, Mr. President? It means that each one of the states that are in the watershed of the Chesapeake Bay, the state of Maryland, the state of Virginia, your state, Mr. President, the state of Virginia, the state of Delaware, state of New York, Pennsylvania, West Virginia, and the District of Columbia, all rely on improving their wastewater treatment facility plants in order to reduce the pollutants going into the bay under the state revolving fund. Well, if that rider became law, the states could not participate in that program. They would not be able to implement one of the major features of their plan in order to reduce the pollutants going into the bay to make it a cleaner body of water. I could talk about the watershed grants that go to schools and go to civic associations, eliminated under the Republican budget. Or I could talk about how the state gets money to operate its water funds, eliminated under the House-passed budget. The Environmental Protection Agency sees their budget reduced by over 30%, plus additional environmental riders that make it very difficult for the Environmental Protection Agency to protect the environment. In Maryland, we would lose $150 million towards the federal government's commitment to the Washington Metro system. This affects the entire area, including Virginia and the district. This is the nation's metro system where the federal workforce gets to work. We entered into a 10-year commitment with the local jurisdictions, including Maryland, Virginia, and the district, that the federal government would be a partner, $150 million a year towards those costs. The House budget eliminates those transit funds. In Head Start, the Republican House budget would cut Head Start by $1.1 billion. 157,000 children would be affected, 2,300 in the state of Maryland, 2,300. These are children that are getting a better start in life because of this program. And the budget and the passing the House, H.R. 1, would eliminate those services for so many of our children. Pell Grants to allow families to be able to afford college education, reduced by $5.7 billion, 9.4 million students. What does it mean for the people of Maryland? It means those who have Pell Grants today could see their grants go down by as much as $650. I can tell you, Mr. President, there are many families in Maryland that just can't afford that extra $650. And without a college education today, it's difficult to be able to be as competitive as you need to be in order to take advantage of our economic opportunities. The WIC program that helps women's, infants, and children cut by 10% under the House-passed budget. NIH funding down $1 billion. Research, and not just at NIH, which is located in my state of Maryland, but also at Johns Hopkins University, the University of Maryland Medical Center, would be disrupted if the Republican-passed House budget H.R. 1 were to become law. Our challenge, as President Obama so well said in the State of the Union address, is that we have to out-educate, out-innovate, and out-build. Our competitors of America is going to be able to compete in the 21st century globally. That's our challenge. H.R. 1, the Republican budget, does not allow us to do that. There's a better way of doing it. And as the President said, we need to do it in a fiscally responsible way. So how do you do it? Well, we need a credible plan to balance the federal budget, a credible plan that will bring in more deficit reduction than H.R. 1, the Republican budget, because you need to allow America to grow, but yet move towards a balanced budget. The only way you can do that is to include, as I said earlier, all sectors, not just discretionary domestic spending. You need to include military spending. You need to deal with entitlements, and you need to deal with revenues. Well, President Obama's budget starts us down that path by freezing discretionary domestic spending over 5 years. Freezing discretionary domestic spending over 5 years. Now, we've already gone further than that in the continuing resolution that we passed. We're all now going to go back to 2010 numbers, and even a little bit below that. So we've already put on the table dramatic reductions in the growth rates of discretionary domestic spending. But we need to include defense. Iraq and Afghanistan need to come to an end, and those savings will be dramatic. America cannot continue to have a growth economy where we spend so much more than any other nation on our national defense. We have to protect the people of this nation, but we can't take the burdens of the world. There has to be adequate burden sharing among our allies, bringing savings to the U.S. taxpayer. In entitlement spending, yes, we need to bring down costs. I think we took a major step forward to doing this on the Affordable Care Act. You know, one of the areas where I agree with some of my Republican friends who are criticizing the Congressional Budget Office, I agree their numbers are off. We're going to get more savings, not less, than what the Congressional Budget Office has estimated. I am convinced that when you deal with people in preventive health care, you use better information technology, where you manage people's diseases, where you deal with readmissions so people understand what they need to do to stay healthy. When you put all that together, when you expand our community health centers, as I was saying earlier about what's happening at the Greater Baden Center on prenatal care, when you do all that, it's going to bring down the growth rate of health care costs. America spends well more than any other nation. In any way you want to calculate it on health care, we need to bring down that growth rate. We don't have the health care results to demonstrate that type of a commitment. We can bring down the cost of health care. And when we do that, by implementing the Affordable Care Act and making sure we get those savings, we will bring down the Medicare costs. We will bring down the Medicaid costs, which will save taxpayers even more under our entitlement spending. We can get those savings. And by the way, we're going to save middle-income families in this country by also reducing their costs in health care. That's what we need to do, making our economy stronger. So we can do something about entitlement spending, and there are other areas that we need to look at. The farm subsidy programs need to be reviewed, and the Dick Commission came in with recommendations in that regard that I think are worthy of our review. And then there's revenues. And yes, I think we need to take a look at revenues. Our current income tax structure cannot be justified. As has been pointed out frequently, we hemorrhage as much revenue in our tax code as we raise. What do I mean by that? If you eliminated all the special provisions, you could cut the tax rates in half. In half. And since we had tax reform in 1986, we've added so many new loopholes and provisions and special interest provisions in the tax code. In 86, we attempted to lower the rates and make sure everybody paid their fair share. Well, it's now 2011 and we're out of balance, and we need to look at tax reform. I have urged us in looking at tax reform that we should look at consumption-based taxes. Now, I know the criticisms of consumption-based taxes, but let me just start by saying if we had consumption-based taxes to deal with some of our income tax revenues, we would be more competitive internationally. Because if you're an export company and you're choosing whether to locate here in America or to locate in another country, You pay income taxes here that can't be taken off the price of your product when you put it in the international marketplace. If you locate in another country that uses consumption taxes at a higher level than we do, we don't use it at all, but higher levels than our income taxes, that country will allow those exporters to take the tax off when they put their product into the international marketplace. And that's acceptable under the World Trade Organization, putting American producers at a disadvantage. We need to save more as a nation. We've heard over and over again the point made that America, during the height of our economic progress, had one of the lowest savings ratios in the world. We need to save more as a nation. Our tax code should encourage savings much more than it does today. I want to make it clear. I am totally committed that in tax reform we make our tax code more progressive. I don't believe it's progressive enough. Progressive means that it is based, at least in part, to the ability to pay. So wealthier people pay a higher percentage of the tax than lower income people. Today, under our income tax, many people do not have to pay income taxes. Well, we can design a consumption tax so they won't have to pay the consumption tax. So there is no new tax burden. In fact, there are proposals out there that could take more people off the tax rolls. And by the way, this is a zero-sum game on revenue. Let's decide how much revenue we need, and let's raise it in the most cost-efficient way that will allow America to grow. That's the type of reforms that I hope we will be able to get into. If we do, it will mean not only bringing our budget into balance by a credible plan that deals with discretionary domestic spending and military spending, entitlement spending, and revenues, but does it in a way that allows America to grow by investing in our future, in education, in energy, in our transportation infrastructure, in transit, and all those areas that we need so that we can meet the challenges of the future, but we do it in a way that is fiscally responsible. How do we get this done? By coming together, listening to each other. I don't think anyone here has a monopoly on what is right. But for the sake of our nation, let's listen to each other and let's try to get this done in a way that we have a credible plan. It's got to be a credible plan. These are not Democratic problems or Republican problems or independent problems. These are American issues. And we've got to put our nation first. So I hope each one of us will step back a little bit and listen to the debate and use the Debt Commission as a model of civility. Again, I'm sure we'll have different views on it, but I hope at the end of the day that we can achieve at least the deficit reduction of the Commission. I think we can do that. I know that our nation and the people of Maryland and the country want us to do this, and working together, I think we can accomplish those goals. And with that, Mr. President, I would yield the floor and suggest the absence of a quorum.
Clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Akaka.
Mr. Alexander.
Well, as you can see, the Senate remains in a quorum call this afternoon. Senators are expected to continue work on the patent and trademark law overhaul legislation they've been working on for a few days. Also, still no clear timetable for votes on 2011 federal spending, as behind-the-scenes negotiations are continuing on those two competing proposals. The fiscal year comes to an end on September 30th. In a related story from the Hill this afternoon, Senator Richard Lugar, who is the most senior member of the Senate Republican Conference, said today that he will oppose the House-passed proposal to make drastic cuts to the federal budget. He is the first Senate Republican to publicly state his opposition to a plan that Democrats have blasted as reckless. Other Republican centrists remain undecided about how to vote. Senator Susan Collins of Maine has said that she has not yet made a decision on H.R. 1. Senate Majority Leader Harry Reid has pledged to schedule an up or down vote on the House-passed plan to put centrists on the record about whether they support it or not.
Mr. President.
The senator from South Carolina.
It's a Senate in quorum call.
It is.
I ask that the quorum call be suspended.
Without objection.
Thank you, Mr. President. I've been sitting in my office listening to news reports about
the Congress and the President arguing about the budget and the debate about what we're going to cut. It's interesting to think back over the last couple of years because it's hard to put these things together after 2 years of the largest expansion of government, the biggest increase in debt in our history. Now suddenly we are debating what needs to be cut. I think over the last couple of years, as the President proposed a massive spending plan that we called a stimulus, Republicans were saying, no, that's not the way to improve the economy. But the President insisted it would keep unemployment below 8% and get our economy going again. Republicans said no. We were accused of being the party of no, but as it turns out, we were right. And then it wasn't too long until the President insisted that we needed essentially a national takeover of our health care system. And this is what he promised would lower the cost of health insurance. Republicans said no, that what we need is more freedom for patients and physicians to work together and more transparency, more competitiveness in the market. The President said no, that his way of nationalizing health care was better. Republicans were again called the party of no for saying that was not the way to go, but as it turns out, we were right. Insurance premiums are headed straight up. Even the New York Times today talked about skyrocketing insurance premiums and less health care. It wasn't long after that until the President and our Democrat majority wanted more of a more national control of our whole banking system with the financial reform. It was supposed to loosen up credit and help our economy get going again, but I've talked to too many bankers back home to believe that that'd work. Of course, Republicans said no, that wasn't the direction we needed to go. We were called a party of no. But as it turns out, we were right. We might say we were the party of no, but you spell it K-N-O-W. We knew that this approach of centralization of power, government control, was not going to stimulate our economy. It wasn't going to improve our health care system. It wasn't going to improve our banking system. It was the time to say no. And last November, the American people decided it was time to say no. And they began to put a stop to what's been going on up here. And we know what happened in the House and the elections over here. But American people, I mean, they were pretty clear. They instinctively knew that we couldn't continue to spend more than we were bringing in. They knew that when you're borrowing 40 cents on every dollar you spend, that sooner or later the country is going to be bankrupt. But it's amazing since that election, even with the changes, that our colleagues here on the other side, even the other day, killed a proposal to balance the budget, a resolution that called for the balancing of the budget. And I think most Americans know if you're not willing to balance your checkbook or balance your budget, sooner or later you're going to be bankrupt. And I think that's what a lot of Americans are afraid of right now. And I think we have a different situation going on with our colleagues on the other side from Wisconsin to here in Washington as we look at the budget problems and the debate on how to cut spending at the federal level. We've got a party of no show. They're not showing up for the debate. In Wisconsin, the Democrats headed across the state line. And in the budget debate, the President, who had pledged to do something about our spending and our deficits and go through the budget line by line, and didn't even produce a budget. And the budget he proposed this year and promised that it would keep us living within our means, I think even the most liberal commentators said this expands our debt nationally probably more than $10 trillion over the next 10 years. We're over $14 trillion in debt. We hit our debt ceiling within the next month or two, and we're debating how much to cut. I just wanted to talk a little bit about this debate because it shows that even with the astounding election we had in November, very quickly Congress is back to business as usual. The deficit we're looking at this year in America, and this is just 1 year, is over $1.5 trillion. That's going to be on top of the $14 trillion that we're already experiencing. And the projections are that we will increase our debt over the next 10 years another $1 trillion every year. Friends, last month, in February, which was a short month, over $220 billion in debts in that 1 month. That's a larger deficit than we've experienced in most years that our country has been around. It's crazy. $220 billion in 1 month. We're facing $1.5 trillion this year. And it's amazing how this place can lower our expectations. Because you know what the debate is about right now? The Republican House has proposed $61 billion in cuts against the $1.5 trillion. The Democrats have told us this is completely unacceptable. Draconian cuts. The President proposed around $6 billion. I think the Democrat leader today is coming out with one that's about $4.5 billion, which some say is too much of a cut. Now, as we're looking at doubling this $14 trillion deficit over the next 10 years, or close to doubling it, the hard decisions that we have to make about how do we deal with Social Security and Medicare, the big decisions about how do we economize, even in areas like our defenses, how do we possibly deal with this debt? We have a Congress now that instead of addressing the issue of $1.5 trillion is debating between $61 billion and $6 billion. These are fractional. You cannot even see the line here of what is being proposed by our Democrat colleagues. I'm afraid that President Obama and the Democrats, like we see in Wisconsin, are not showing up for this debate. Instead of proposing realistic ways to tighten our belts at the federal level, to look at how we can balance our checkbook, as so many Americans have to do every month in their homes, the President has decided to sit on the sidelines and criticize things that have to be trimmed or cut or changed. I mean, it's amazing that the Democrat leader has called Republicans mean-spirited because they're proposing to cut funding for a cowboy poetry festival. A cowboy poetry festival. Now, I love poetry and cowboys as much as anyone else, but we're looking at bankrupting our nation, destroying the future that was given to us by our predecessors. And we can't even get close to a realistic debate on how we can stop this rampage towards bankruptcy in America. This is not enough. Even what the House Republicans have done is not enough. I realize that politics is sometimes the art of the possible. But I'm hoping that it can become the promotion of the principles that make this country great and can secure our future. We all have to decide today how we're going to vote. Obviously, this $6 billion is not a serious proposal by our Democrat colleagues. But I think those of us who realize that we're up against a mountain of debt, how do we deal with even the highest proposal now that's coming through Congress? My point is this. There's some hard decisions that have to be made here in Washington, some very hard decisions. There's a new reality that we have to face as a Congress. We have to tell the truth. Americans just want the truth. They want fact-based budgeting. They want us to do the things that we need to do to save our country. Obviously, no one wants anything that's coming to them to be cut. But I've talked to too many Americans that have said, keep fighting, do what has to be done to leave this country as good as we found it. I think that's a reasonable thing for us to consider here. And what we're doing here is not even within the realm of reality of what has to be done to leave America better than we found it. This is not about partisan politics anymore. This is about the survival of America. This is really about avoiding bankruptcy, not just for our country, but this country has been the bastion of freedom and the model for democracy and freedom for centuries. Other countries, even today, are looking at us and wanting to be free as violence erupts around the world to try to overthrow authoritarian regimes so people can live in freedom. But at the same time, other countries strive to be like America. America seems to be determined, at least at the political level, to push our way towards a third world country that's so in debt and so dependent that we no longer can determine our own destiny. Because today America is literally on its knees to China and other countries for the credit we need to run our economy. We're also on our knees to the Middle East, which is very unstable right now, for the energy we need to run our country, to even take our food to market, the essentials here at home. But instead of addressing the real issues, knowing that this budget is in front of us over the last couple of weeks, when we knew we just had this 2-week funding bill to get us through, instead of debating what we're really up against, we've been dealing with a patent bill. Now, I think it's a good thing to improve our patent system. But, folks, the party that's leading the Senate here has been a no-show on the issue that is really threatening our country. And unless they show up, it is very difficult for Republicans who are not in the White House, they're not controlling the Senate, to actually take the steps that are needed to move our country back in the right direction. So my invitation today is to my Democrat colleagues. Well, after listening to them call us the party of no, I will say that we were right. And I hope is they will listen to what we're saying here and show up for the debate on our budget and what we need to do to change the role of the federal government, to devolve functions back to the states and back to individuals so that this country can continue to survive, thrive, succeed in the future. This is within our grasp, and this is something that we can do. This is not a doomsday scenario, because many of the solutions are not in what the federal government can do, but what the federal government can let go of. Because as we look at the problems we have today, it's not a matter that freedom has failed. The problem is we have failed to let freedom work. We've tried to take control of education, of health care, of transportation, of energy, of retirement programs. And the fact is we haven't done it well, and now we're spending so much that our country is threatened with bankruptcy. They're good solutions if we're willing to look at letting things go. And as we consider this massive debt hill that we have to climb, we need to realize that we can and we must balance a budget. That is probably I would consider the #1 goal of the Republicans right now, is to produce a budget that shows within 5 years that we can balance the budget and leave America better off than before we started. And I believe with real freedom solutions that we can do that. But we need to go back to where we started. This political system, this Washington establishment, has brought America to the brink of bankruptcy. The debt in 1 year, even 1 month, we're talking about not even addressing for maybe a few days. And we can't even agree on this $61 billion. I hope the American people who were so instrumental in changing things in November will rise up and let Washington know that it's time to get serious about reforming the way we spend money in Washington. We've had reports in the last week that show over $100 billion of just outright waste that we could cut immediately if we would just address it. But when one party won't show up for the debate, it's very difficult to do. Let's make this more than partisan politics. Let's cooperate. Let's look at the real problem, and let's address it. And I believe we can succeed. Thank you, Mr. President. I yield back, suggest the absence of quorum.